I was going to review this movie when it actually came out like a good film YouTuber, but then I didn't. Hello, you're watching another WWM Productions video, and I'm Jenna, and today, as you can tell from the title of the video, why do I say this every week, but I'm reviewing the movie Mank. Woo! Mank. It's a movie. Did I like it? You bet. I think if I'm going to accurately review this movie and to talk about Mank, the historical period drama taking place in the 1930s and 40s in America, I'm going to have to get into the vibe a little bit here, which is really just code for me being way too dramatic for a video. But anyway, I think I should just dive right into it. So, let's talk about Mank. Mank is the movie that follows the writing of what is generally hailed as cinema's greatest masterpiece, or at least American cinema, Citizen Kane. I mean, I can't speak on it. I haven't watched that movie. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. It's been on my list. Don't come at me about it. But it follows the writing of Citizen Kane, and the only writer of Citizen Kane is Herman Mankiewicz, or, as you can guess, Mank. And Orson Welles' name is on it because he signed away his right to be credited with the screenwriting nod, and it follows him writing it in some cabin in the desert somewhere where there's no alcohol, and he has 60 days to do it. And he is trying to write what is the best screenplay of his life, essentially, because his career has kind of taken a turn for the worse. He was fairly prominent, but now he has kind of lost any of his allies, and this was kind of just the chance to be something more. But he also has a broken leg, so as you can tell, really the only thing he's doing in those scenes is writing, and because of that, most of the plot is told through flashbacks to earlier in Hollywood's history, throughout his career and the turns it takes and the people he meets and how it plays into the screenplay that he's writing and what will eventually become Citizen Kane. I guess I should actually review this movie. I thought this movie was really very good. Mank is a good movie. Is Mank my favorite movie? No. Is that okay? Yes. Because I still had a solid, good time watching this movie, and I think you will too. Because while it's not the movie that you can kind of sit and watch and turn your mind off, you do need to be thinking, because the few times that I did kind of space out because I was tired or I got focused on something else I was maybe doing while I was watching the movie, I really needed to just throw myself back into it because I was quickly losing track of what was happening. But it's also not the most complicated movie to sit there and digest. It does have themes, but it's up to you how far you want to take them. Like, if you're like me, who generally takes a couple days to really, sit in their feelings over a movie and really, won't get some of the greater themes until they've really thought about it, then you could still really enjoy this movie because there's a lot to just sit there and enjoy right in the moment. And I really appreciate that in a movie, because sometimes you don't want to sit there constantly thinking about a movie. You kind of just want there to be things you can enjoy right on the surface, and then take all of the spoonfills later and figure out what on earth was this movie. There were a couple of things while I was watching this movie that I really fell in love with the most, and that was my MO here, I guess. The score, the production, and all of the design, the story, and the history. It would be smart to first talk about the story, and I really liked it because it kind of took a lesser-known part of history and said, hey, we're going to talk about this. And I'm not just talking about how they chose to focus on the story of Herman Mankiewicz, who is obviously not the name you think of when you think of Citizen Kane. You think of Orson Welles. There's a reason for that. This movie talks about that. And I thought that was really interesting to really go into a part of Hollywood's history on that level and be like, hey, here's something you should know. But then also, it goes into a whole lot more about Hollywood, because this is definitely one of those movies that kind of looks at Hollywood and is like, oh wow, isn't it great? But then it says, no, it's not always that great, and I think that's really interesting considering things that go on right now. I just really liked it because it really took the issues that were at play during that time in history in the 1930s with the Great Depression and how that affected so many different people and their jobs, and then the 1940s with World War II and how that affected so many people. And it also took in the politics of the time, like Upton Sinclair is somehow a major factor into this movie. Like, Bill Nye is Upton Sinclair in this movie for like 30 seconds, so like, if that's something you want to see, then watch Mank. It's on Netflix. These are the things you get with your Netflix subscription, I suppose. But I just found it really interesting how they took all these different political factors at play that normally, like, you don't hear about. And also, if you maybe took AP US History, you have to learn about the Gilded Age, and a Gilded Age is generally a time period that you can describe as looking super golden on the outside, but the more you dig into it, the more you realize that that's just a facade. And you see this at play a lot in this movie, especially when you kind of think about, or at least the few things I know about Citizen Kane, and how that all plays into it, because you have to remember that the parts of this movie that you are seeing the most dynamic forces at play and the most you see of Hollywood are told in flashbacks that influence the writing of Citizen Kane. Which is just, the more I think about it and the more I talk about it, the more my brain is trying to connect dots. Maybe they shouldn't be connected, but I'm connecting them. However, if we're going to talk about the flashback parts of this, I should probably address the elephant in the room in that the flashbacks are far more interesting than the parts when Mank is writing Citizen Kane. And that was a little frustrating because you'd want to just run back into all those flashbacks and be like, oh my god, I want to see all the things and I want to know about all of the things that are happening, and then the movie would be like, no, we gotta go back to the future a little bit and like see Mank writing, and it's like, no, I don't want that. It got, the pacing of this movie could be definitely a little bit varied in not a great way. It just got a little frustrating when things were happening in one part of the movie and then they weren't happening, and you couldn't really give a discernible reason as to why you should have to miss out on the things that you were liking. That being said, that definitely doesn't sink this movie, and I know I say that, like, I really wish there were more of the flashbacks and, like, that was a greater focus. I also understand the importance of having the flashing back and forth, that it was definitely necessary, but I do wish it was done a little bit more stronger so that the audience could definitely get more of the dynamic part of the movie that drove it. I guess I should talk about what I already touched upon, but that is the history of this movie. And I mean, I'm a history nerd. I just thought that this movie did a really great job of illustrating the things that we don't always think about when we think of, like, this black and white period of Hollywood, and all of the different factors at play and how politics definitely played a larger role in it than we maybe think of today. But even then, I just found it really, really interesting, and that's why I latched on so heavily to the flashbacks, because even if, like honestly, I was getting distracted from the story because I was just like, oh wow, it's history, it's 1930s, this is so cool. So maybe that's why this video isn't that coherent. I got a little distracted. There was a lot to enjoy. Maybe I wasn't looking at the right things. That's okay. But that's it. That's all I'm going to say about the history, because I also don't want to spoil too much about the movie, because the history definitely plays a large role in everything that occurs. But it was just really fascinating to see how all of this plays into Mank's character and the things that he goes through, especially with his career, because Mank is a very interesting guy. He doesn't hide his feelings, and he is way too smart with his feelings. More often than not, he's making more enemies, but then he will also make some allies through him just being himself. And it's funny to see how those tides turn throughout the movie, and you meet people like William Hurst, who, won't spoil it if you are like me and don't know that much about Citizen Kane, but you know, Hurst is important. And then an actress named Marion, and Marion is a really cool character in this movie. I thought she was really cool. And we see all of these different catalysts throughout his life that influence his career and the things that he does. And I just thought it was all like a really interesting map of like Hollywood and how things are connected and the different connections you can have and how quickly like something can build and how quickly it can all fall apart. I just thought it was really cool. The production in this movie is top-notch, in my opinion. From the costumes, to the sets, to the directing decisions, this movie is just so wonderful to look at. Which is, if you're making a movie, a piece of visual media, you hopefully will make it look good, but this movie looks exceptionally good. Because it is black and white, which already has me, like, on the floor, because black and white movies, I don't think we have enough black and white movies anymore. Like, suddenly we discovered that color exists, and we were like, wow, guys, we need to make all of the movies like this. But now we're seeing a lot more, like, redone black and white movies. But I just thought it also just really played into the story it was telling as well, because not only was it just black and white, they also added some imperfections that made it look like film popping a little bit. That really gave it the authentic feel. This is a movie from the time period that they're filming. And also just the directing decisions that they made felt like almost like a movie from an older time period that wasn't filmed recently. Like, all of the different transitions that came into effect were always like a different fade to black, and I don't know, I have a weird thing with transitions, but those transitions just really worked, and they just felt really dynamic and interesting and played into all of the scenes. And the flashbacks were really easy to introduce because they would introduce them like typewriter script, and then they would also like bump it up and down like on a typewriter, which I thought was just such a small detail that just really shows how invested they were in making this a good movie, because you didn't have to do that. And also, all of the costumes were perfect. They were either like the body Hollywood movie dramatic pieces or just common wear that people would have on. I don't know the historical accuracy, but just as a moviegoer, they looked nice. They definitely looked like there was a lot of effort put into them, and I thought that they were just really great. And then all of the sets, because it especially captured the Hollywood glow that comes with like all of those movies that take place on different Hollywood studios, that is really magical, but really allowed this movie to show all of the different like backroom things that happened and all of the behind the scenes, because not only were we seeing sets being moved around in different acting studios and other things that are on Hollywood studios, whatever comes to mind, you would see that, but you would also see writing rooms in different empty theaters, and it was really cool. And there were just so many good decisions made while making this movie that I just was floored. It was wonderful to look at. Even if I didn't understand all of the twists the story was making, I was just willing to sit there and go with it, because I didn't want to look away from what was happening. So while it might not have been always the screenwriting that just had me drawn in, I was always ready to be right back hooked up again when I could fall back in line with the story. And of course, last big important thing here, the score. Just so you know, this score was done by 2/3 of the people that did the score for Soul, so you know it's good. Yes, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross did the score for this movie, and they did a really great job, and it was just so good. The soundtrack really worked, because there were so many times I was watching this movie and I was like, is this like an original score, or is this like found score that they're using, because it would fit so well. And I'm like, is this supposed to be music that they're actually hearing in the scene, or is this just music that we're hearing? Because it all fit so well into this movie. It melded itself right into the story it was telling, and it was its own beating organ throughout this movie. It was not something that stuck out. It didn't necessarily try to stick out so much. It was just in this movie, so intrinsically in it, that you could not take it away. Like, if you took it away, this movie would not be as good as it is. And I know you could say that about a lot of movies, but it would be like an aching hole in this movie if you took the score out of it. And while I don't have the most intelligent things to say about it, score is very good, and it works so well for the dynamic they're telling, because while black and white movies are so amazing, and this movie does it so well, especially with the story they're telling, you do lose some of the color in the movie you're making, and especially when we've become so accustomed to having color, that the score puts so much color into it that you can almost like imagine it with color, because you have the score giving you so much, and between the story and all of the characters and all of the different just moving parts, the score really just helped blend it all together and just make it so amazing. And I really enjoyed Mank. It was a solid movie with so many great aspects to it that you could honestly pick apart so much, and that if I were making a longer video, I could do it. But right now, I'm just still sitting here like floored by how good it was. Like, I'm not surprised that it has so many nominations right now in the Golden Globes. Like, it definitely deserves it. It takes one of the most like triumphant pieces of American film there is, and looks at a part of it that no one knows and so much about Hollywood that we don't always remember, and says, how about we think about this now? And I think that that's really great. And there's so much you could say about this movie, but I think you should go and think about it yourself. So, Mank, 8.5 out of 10. So, hats off to Mank. And hats off to you for finally getting through all of this video. I thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. I greatly appreciate it. If you have any thoughts, you've seen the movie yourself, or you have anything you want to say about my own thoughts about the movie, leave a comment. If you're even so inclined, subscribe. We have a weekly podcast here on the channel that we update every Wednesday or Thursday, depending on things that come up. And even if you don't want to listen to a podcast on YouTube, find us on Spotify and a million other different places that I'll link down in the description. And me and my channel partner, Ava, she will post a video next week, and then I'll post another video. So there's just a whole lot of content to go around. And with that, I'll leave you to the rest of your day. I thank you so much for watching. Final thought, Mank is a good movie. Bye, everyone. So, my final form, a fedora.